Have you ever wondered what it feels like to march into a jungle as a proud soldier and leave it as a starving ghost? Tonight I want to tell you a true story, a story based on the experiences of thousands of Japanese soldiers who fought in Burma during World War II. This is not a story about famous generals. It is not a story about great victories. It is a story about survival, about hunger, about men pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. In the spring of 1944, a young Japanese soldier marched into the jungles of Burma. For this story, we will call him Kenji. Like many soldiers his age, Kenji believed victory was near. His officers told him the Imperial Army was strong. They told him the enemy would soon be defeated. They told him that food and supplies would be captured once the advance succeeded. The men believed them. Why wouldn't they? Most were young. Most had never known defeat. As they marched deeper into Burma, the jungle seemed endless. Towering trees blocked out the sunlight. The air was thick and heavy. Every breath felt like breathing through a wet cloth. Mosquitoes swarmed around them day and night. Leeches clung to their legs whenever they crossed streams. The jungle never slept, and neither did the soldiers. At first, the men still had food, not much, but enough. Each day they received their rice ration and continued marching. Then the rations became smaller and smaller and smaller. One evening, Kenji looked into his mess tin. The amount of rice he received barely covered the bottom. Some men laughed nervously. Others said nothing. Everyone knew something was wrong, but nobody wanted to admit it. Days later, the food became even scarcer. Supply lines had collapsed. The Allied forces were holding their ground. The expected victories never came, and the supplies they had been promised never arrived. The hunger began quietly. At first, it was only an empty feeling in the stomach. Then came the weakness. Then the headaches. Then the constant thoughts that never stopped. Thoughts about food. One soldier talked about fish his mother used to cook. Another described a bowl of hot noodles. A third man spoke about steamed rice fresh from the cooker. As he described it, tears rolled down his face. Soon, other men were crying too, not because they were afraid, because they were hungry. Weeks passed. The rice disappeared completely. The soldiers began eating jungle plants, roots, leaves, grass, anything they believed might keep them alive. Some boiled leather straps from their equipment. Others cut pieces from saddles belonging to dead pack animals. The leather was tough, almost impossible to chew, but they swallowed it anyway, because starving men cannot be choosy. One afternoon, Kenji noticed several soldiers gathered around something. As he approached, he realized they were fighting. Not over a weapon, not over supplies. They were fighting over a dead snake. A small snake, something they would normally ignore. Now it was a meal. The jungle showed no mercy. Malaria spread through the ranks. Dysentery weakened countless men. Fever swept through entire units. Strong soldiers who had once carried heavy packs now struggled to stand. Faces became hollow. Eyes sank deep into their skulls. Uniforms hung loosely from bodies that had become little more than skin and bone. Then came the rain, the monsoon. Endless rain, day after day, night after night. Rain soaked their clothing, rain filled their boots, rain turned the roads into rivers of mud. The men were never dry, not for a single day. Then the order came. Retreat. The offensive had failed. The Japanese army was withdrawing. The men who had marched proudly into Burma would now fight simply to stay alive. The retreat was worse than the advance, far worse. Every step felt heavier. Every mile seemed impossible. The weak fell behind. The sick collapsed. At first, comrades tried to help each other, but eventually there was no strength left. One morning, Kenji woke beside his friend Hiroshi. The two had trained together. They had shared meals, shared stories, shared dreams of returning home. Kenji reached over and shook his shoulder. No response. He shook him again. Nothing. Hiroshi had died during the night, quietly, without a sound, without a goodbye. There was no energy left to dig a grave, no strength left for a ceremony. The column began moving. Kenji stood there for a moment, looking down at his friend. Then he turned and followed the others, leaving Hiroshi behind. Years later, that moment would still haunt him. More than the battles, more than the gunfire, more than the enemy. As the retreat continued, more soldiers disappeared. Some died where they fell. Others wandered into the jungle searching for food and never returned. Many simply sat down beneath trees, too exhausted to continue, too weak to stand. And once they sat down, they never got back up. The survivors crossed rivers swollen by rain. Some men were so weak they drowned while trying to cross. Others collapsed on the riverbanks. Nobody had the strength to help them. The living could barely carry themselves. Months later, Kenji finally reached friendly territory. He barely recognized himself. He had lost more than half his body weight. His uniform hung from him like a blanket draped over a skeleton. Of the men who had entered Burma with him, less than half remained. Years after the war ended, people often asked him about combat, about battles, about the enemy. But Kenji rarely spoke about those things. Instead, he spoke about hunger. He spoke about watching strong young men slowly disappear. He spoke about the endless rain, the endless mud, the endless suffering. And most of all, he spoke about the silence. The terrible silence left behind when a friend who marched beside you yesterday is gone today. The Burma campaign became one of the greatest disasters in Japanese military history. Tens of thousands of soldiers never returned home. Many did not die from bullets. Many did not die from bombs. They died from starvation, disease, exhaustion, and the unforgiving jungle itself. For the survivors, the memories lasted a lifetime, because in Burma, their greatest enemy was not the Allied army. It was hunger. And for many, hunger won.